kind of friend of mine. I consider it a friend, really. Here's a Eupholus weevil. And these guys are wonderful. And there's a huge diversity in the appearance. Some of them look like, I don't know what the appropriate word to use is, especially online, like bird poo. I've got 4 young children, and poo is a very common word we use all the time in the house. So yeah, so some of these patterns arise because either they're very attractive and they're conspicuous signalers, or they've got black backgrounds, some white patches here or there, some sort of yellowy browny patches here or there, to mimic bird droppings so that they're not predated upon or preyed upon. So this is a wonderful species because of the 2 different types of color that we see. The black region stripes actually is interesting for another purpose. People, it's very fashionable and very useful to wear a black suit or a black dress. How do we get good black? How do we get good white? Those are questions that the biological systems can actually provide some help with. But here we've got 2 different colors. The scales from this region, these are about 30 microns in diameter, so they're relatively small. And it's the structure within these 2 different sorts of scales which generates the color, the interaction with light. So in these sorts of scales, from that greeny blue region, we see wonderful 3-dimensionally ordered crystals. Photonic crystals. I don't mean atomic or semiconductor crystals, but photonic crystals. The length scale of this periodicity here is about 200 or 300 nanometers. Great. So that's a kind of that color, and we think, what's the bug doing to get this color? Surely it's just changing the lattice constant a little bit. Turns out that's not the case. When we look at the scales from this region, we see something entirely, well, it's not entirely different, it's related, but structurally, geometrically, it's very different. Suddenly, instead of a high degree of order, we see a high degree of what you might expect to be disorder. Clearly, it's not disordered because we still get a strong color reflection. If it was disordered, we'd scatter simultaneously all wavelengths. This is sufficiently ordered. Somewhere on the sliding scale between highly ordered photonic systems and highly disordered photonic systems, somewhere along that sliding scale sits this structure and this color generation. Now, a big question was, what's the cost and what's the benefit? Well, clearly, that should give a purer color, and that, as I've intimated, should give a much sort of broader color. We have a facility in Exeter to measure the BRDF, the bidirectional reflection distribution function. If I have a sample here on the table and I shine light straight down onto it, depending on the nature of the sample, I will get light scatter into the hemisphere above this. If I could pick that hemisphere up and flatten it, it would look like a circle, and at the edge of the circle would be the horizon. So there it is. The reflection from that scale, there's the horizon, there's a 60-degree line, there's a 30-degree line, and that's a 5-degree line. The highly periodic structure gives pure color, and it gives a narrow reflection angle. That might be a benefit. It might be a cost if you want broad visibility. But this relatively disordered system, the color purity it produces is much reduced, but then the scattered angle is increased. So it's a trade-off. It's a balance. And by looking at some of these systems, we can start to get a feel for the cost and the benefit of moving from ordered photonic systems, colored systems, towards disordered systems. We wanted to understand what generated such brilliant color in this, and perhaps slightly less brilliant color in its cousin species, Lepidiota. And the scales are tremendously wide, reminding me of when I used to go, before kids, skiing in France. The roof tiles of these French French houses were just like this in my early memory. So let's take one of these scales and damage it and have a look underneath and just see what we see. Inside the scale, we see a scattering structure that is truly disordered. And the disorder of these interconnected filamentary networks, that scatters all wavelengths across visible, near UV, near infrared, very efficiently. The polydispersity and the anisotropy of these scattering centers is remarkably efficient. And the efficiency specifically lies in the filling fraction. How packed are these scattering centers? Well, they're not very packed. There's a lot of air. The light gray in here is air, and that is responsible for the bright whiteness, the brilliant whiteness that we see. So that pretty much leads me to the end, and I think I'm bang on 30 minutes. I've got a couple of short summary slides, the first one of which, I've got a lovely video in the background that I'd like to try to start. There it is. So what message should we take home from this? I'd like to draw up a set of rules that we might refer to with respect to smart clothing in biological systems. Any type of color appearance that we can perceive is usually already evolved and has been presented to us in these biological systems. It encompasses order, quasi-order, and disorder along some sort of curious sliding scale of that structure. The fact that these biological materials can just grow is remarkable and is something that we must surely aspire towards. The take-home message from today that I often try to, at the end of a day at home, get home from work and we do bath time and reading time and dinner time and I tuck the kids in. What did you enjoy today? What did you learn today is often what I try to bring home. Well, the key message today, the tuck-in message, if you will, is that these biological systems tolerate imperfection with respect to the mechanisms generating their appearance. And that fault tolerance is a remarkable quality that surely we must try to chase. Finally, lots of